The massive ships hung in space like dark mountains. Their black hulls stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. These were the ships of the Zephyrian Dominion, and they had come to end another world. Admiral Vexthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the peaceful planet Altair through the giant window. The blue and green world turned slowly below them, unaware that death had arrived. His 4 eyes glowed red in the darkness, as he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "How many ships do they have?" Vexthul asked his weapons officer. "Only 12 defense cruisers, Admiral. They are old models, barely armed," the officer replied, his voice filled with contempt. "This will be easy." Vexthul nodded. It was always easy. For 300 years, his people had swept across the galaxy like a plague. World after world fell before their superior technology and ruthless tactics. The Altairans would be no different from the thousands of other species they had crushed. On the planet's surface, Dr. Lisa Chen was working late in her laboratory when the alarms began to sound. She looked up from her research on peaceful energy systems, confused by the urgent wailing that filled the air. Through her window, she could see people running in the streets, their faces filled with terror. Her communication device buzzed with an emergency message. "All citizens must evacuate immediately. Unknown hostile forces have entered our system. This is not a drill." Lisa's heart pounded as she gathered her research data. Like most Altairans, she had heard stories of the Zephyrian Dominion, but they seemed like distant nightmares. Altair was far from the main trade routes, a quiet world of scientists and artists. Why would anyone want to attack them? In space above, the Altairan defense fleet moved to intercept the alien ships. Captain Rex Morgan commanded the lead cruiser, knowing full well that his small force stood no chance against the enormous Zephyrian dreadnoughts. But they had families on the planet below, and they would not run. "All ships, target the lead vessel," Morgan ordered. "Maybe we can slow them down long enough for the evacuation ships to escape." The Altairan cruisers opened fire, their energy beams striking the Zephyrian flagship. The weapons that could level buildings barely scratched the alien ship's shields. It was like throwing stones at a fortress. Vexthul watched the pathetic attack with amusement. "Return fire. Destroy them all." The Zephyrian weapons erupted in brilliant flashes of light. Each shot from their plasma cannons was more powerful than anything the Altairans could produce. The first defense cruiser exploded instantly, its hull torn apart by the overwhelming force. The second ship lasted only moments longer before it, too, was reduced to burning wreckage. Captain Morgan's ship shook violently as alien fire tore through its armor. Sparks flew from control panels as his crew fought desperately to keep their weapons online. "Sir, we've lost main power. Shields are failing," his tactical officer reported. Morgan closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his wife and children in the evacuation center below. "All hands abandon ship. We've done what we could." The escape pods launched just as another plasma blast tore through the cruiser's hull. Morgan stayed at his post until the end, watching his crew escape before the ship exploded around him. On Altair's surface, Lisa ran through the crowded streets toward the spaceport. Families carried their children and precious belongings as they fled toward the evacuation ships. The sky above glowed with the fires of their destroyed fleet. An old man stumbled beside her, and Lisa helped him to his feet. "What do they want? From us?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "We never hurt anyone." Lisa had no answer. The Zephyrians didn't want anything from them. They simply destroyed because they could. It was their nature, like a fire that burns everything in its path. At the spaceport, desperate crowds pushed toward the few ships available. There weren't enough vessels to carry everyone, and panic was spreading. Lisa used her scientist credentials to help coordinate the evacuation, trying to get children and elderly aboard first. Above them, Vexthul's fleet had finished destroying the defense force. Now they turned their attention to the planet itself. The admiral studied the world below with cold calculation. "Begin orbital bombardment of military targets," he ordered. "Then move to population centers. We need the mining facilities intact, but the people are useless to us." The first bombardment struck the planet's capital city, Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds, replaced by mushroom clouds of fire and smoke. The ground shook like an earthquake as more shots rained down from space. Lisa felt the ship lift off just as the bombardment began. Through the small window, she watched her beautiful homeworld burn. Forests that had taken millennia to grow were turned to ash in moments. Cities became craters of molten glass. But even as her ship fled the system, Lisa's communication device picked up a strange transmission. It was faint and heavily encoded, but she managed to decode part of it. The message was short and came from somewhere far beyond the galaxy's edge. Terran Command to Altair Defense Force. We have received your distress call. The cavalry is coming. Repeat, the cavalry is coming. Lisa frowned. Terran? She had never heard of any species called Terrans, but something in those words gave her hope. Someone, somewhere, was answering their call for help. Aboard his flagship, Vexthal received the same transmission. His intelligence officers brought it to his attention, but he dismissed it with a wave of his clawed hand. Probably another week. Species trying to sound threatening, he said. Add their system to our target list. When we finish here, we'll crush them too. The Admiral turned back to watch Altair burn, unaware that he had just made the greatest mistake of his long military career. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something was stirring, something that had been watching and waiting for this moment. The Zephyrian Dominion had ruled the galaxy through fear and superior firepower for 3 centuries, but their reign of terror was about to meet its match. They just didn't know it yet. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the hidden shipyard deep beneath Earth's surface, watching as the final weapons were installed on his ship. The USS Defiance was unlike anything humanity had ever built before. Its sleek black hull seemed to absorb light, making it nearly invisible against the darkness of space. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" said Commander Amy Rodriguez, walking up beside him. Amy had been Jake's best friend since their academy days, and now she served as his tactical officer aboard the Defiance. Jake nodded, but his face was serious. "Beautiful and deadly. Let's hope she's deadly enough." The 2 officers had grown up hearing stories about the monsters that ruled the galaxy. When Jake was just a boy, his grandfather had told him about the refugees who arrived on Earth 50 years ago. They came from distant worlds, broken and scared, with tales of a terrible empire that destroyed everything in its path. Most people on Earth thought the stories were just myths. Space was vast, and the galaxy seemed so far away, but Earth's leaders believed the refugees, and they began to prepare in secret. Admiral Frank Hayes approached them, his weathered face showing the strain of decades spent planning for this moment. Hayes had dedicated his entire career to preparing Earth for the coming war. "Morrison, Rodriguez, we need to talk," the Admiral said, leading them to a secure briefing room. Inside the room, holographic displays showed star maps covered in red zones. Each red area represented a system conquered by the Zephyrian Dominion. The red was spreading like a disease, moving closer to Earth with each passing year. "The Altair system fell yesterday," Hayes said grimly. "That puts them only 12 light years from our outer colonies. Intelligence suggests they'll reach Sol within 6 months." Amy studied the display. "How long have we known they were coming?" 47 years, Hayes replied. "Ever since the first Altairan refugees reached Earth, they warned us about the Dominion, but at first we didn't believe them. The enemy seemed too far away, too powerful to be real." Jake remembered his history lessons. In the early days, Earth's governments had argued about what to do. Some wanted to hide and hope the aliens would never find them. Others wanted to build massive defense fleets using old technology. But a few wise leaders had a different idea. "We decided to play dead," Hayes continued. "We made Earth look like a primitive world, barely capable of spaceflight. While the Dominion conquered the galaxy, we studied every piece of information we could find about them. We learned their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses." Dr. Kevin Walsh entered the briefing room carrying a data pad filled with technical specifications. Kevin was the chief weapons engineer for the Defiance project, a genius who had spent 20 years developing new technologies. "The adaptive armor plating is ready," Kevin announced. It can analyze incoming weapons fire and adjust its molecular structure to provide maximum protection. Each hit makes it stronger against that type of attack. Amy whistled in appreciation. What about the quantum cannons? Fully operational, Kevin smiled. They fire bursts of pure energy that can penetrate any known shield technology. But the real surprise is the AI combat system. It learns from every battle, becoming smarter and more effective with each engagement. Jake walked over to examine a scale model of his ship. The Defiance was smaller than the massive Zephyrian dreadnoughts, but it was packed with revolutionary technology. Every system had been designed specifically to counter the alien advantages. How many ships do we have? Jake asked. 3 are ready now, Hayes replied. The Defiance, Vengeance, and Liberty. 5 more will be completed within the month. It's not many compared to their thousands, but quality matters more than quantity. The Admiral activated another hologram, showing footage captured by spy drones. Zephyrian ships moved through space like giant predators, their weapons blazing as they destroyed helpless worlds. They've grown lazy, Hayes observed. 3 centuries of easy victories have made them overconfident. They use the same tactics, against every enemy, never adapting or changing their approach. Amy leaned forward. That's going to be their downfall. Exactly, Hayes agreed. Human adaptability has always been our greatest strength. We learn, we improvise, we overcome. The Zephyrians rely on brute force and superior technology, but they don't know how to think outside the box. Jake studied the enemy ships on the display. What's our mission? The Zephyrian advance fleet is gathering at the Kepler system, Hayes explained. They're preparing for a final jump to Earth. Your job is to intercept them and show the galaxy that the Dominion can be beaten. Dr. Walsh handed Jake a special communication device. This contains a message from Earth's leaders to every enslaved world in the galaxy. When you defeat the Zephyrians, broadcast it on all frequencies. Let everyone know that the fight back has begun. Jake took the device, feeling its weight in his hands. It represented more than just technology. It carried the hopes of billions of beings throughout the galaxy. We've been preparing for this moment our entire lives, Amy said quietly. Our parents, our grandparents, all working toward this day. Hayes nodded. Humanity spent 50 years learning how to fight these monsters. We studied their weaknesses, developed countermeasures, and built weapons they've never seen before. But most importantly, we never forgot what we're fighting for. Jake looked at his friends and colleagues, seeing determination in their eyes. They all knew the risks. The Defiance might be humanity's most advanced ship, but it was still just one vessel against an empire that controlled half the galaxy. When do we launch? Jake asked. Tomorrow at dawn, Hayes replied. The galaxy has been waiting 3 centuries for someone to stand up to the Dominion. That someone is us. As they left the briefing room, Jake felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, the monsters who had terrorized the galaxy were coming for Earth. But they were about to discover that humanity was not another helpless victim. Earth had been preparing, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could do when they fought back. Sub-Commander Kralnek stood on the bridge of his cruiser, studying the readouts from his scanning equipment. His ship was part of the Zephyrian advance fleet gathering at the Kepler system, preparing for the final assault on the primitive world called Earth. Sir, we have an unknown contact on our sensors, his tactical officer reported. It just appeared out of nowhere, about 50,000 kilometers away. Kralnex was young for a Zephyrian officer, having earned his position through family connections, rather than battlefield experience. He had never actually fought a real battle, only participated in the destruction of defenseless worlds. What kind of ship is it? He asked, trying to sound confident. Unknown design, sir. It's much smaller than our cruisers, maybe half the size. The hull configuration doesn't match any known species in our database. Kralnex looked at the display screen, seeing a sleek black shape hanging motionless in space. The ship looked strange, compared to the bulky designs most species used. It seemed almost elegant, like it had been built for speed rather than intimidation. Probably another species trying to surrender before we destroy their world, Kralnex said dismissively. open a communication channel and demand they explain themselves. Aboard the USS Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the enemy ships on his main screen. There were 5 Zephyrian cruisers in the system, each one 10 times larger than his ship. But size wasn't everything. "They're trying to contact us, Captain," said Lieutenant Paul Stevens from the communication station. "Put them through, Paul. Let's see what they have to say." The alien voice that came through the speakers was harsh and filled with arrogance. "Unknown vessel, you are in territory claimed by the Zephyrian Dominion. Identify yourself immediately, or be destroyed." Jake smiled grimly. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Defiance. You are the ones who need to explain yourselves. This system is under the protection of the Terran fleet." There was silence for a moment, then laughter from the alien commander. "Terran? We have never heard of your species. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." "I don't think so," Jake replied. "Amy, are our weapons ready?" Commander Amy Rodriguez checked her tactical display. "All systems are green, Captain. The quantum cannons are charged and ready to fire." Chief Engineer Maria Santos called from the engine room through the ship's communication system. "Captain, all experimental systems are online. The adaptive armor is functioning perfectly, and the AI combat system is analyzing the enemy ships." Jake had studied the Zephyrian tactics for years. They always used the same approach: overwhelming firepower applied without strategy or finesse. They relied on their superior technology to crush any opposition before it could mount an effective defense. "Kralnex, isn't it?" Jake said, having intercepted the alien's name from their internal communications. "Let me give you some advice. Turn around and go home. This is your only warning." On the Zephyrian bridge, Kralnex felt his face burn with embarrassment. How dare this primitive creature speak to him with such disrespect? His crew was watching, and he could not appear weak. "Destroy that ship," he ordered. "Show them the price of defying the Dominion." The 5 Zephyrian cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Plasma beams that could melt through solid rock struck the Defiance from multiple angles. The alien officers expected to see the human ship explode instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The Defiance's hull seemed to shimmer and change color as the plasma beams hit it. The deadly energy was absorbed and dispersed harmlessly across the ship's surface. "Impossible," Kralnex whispered. "Nothing can withstand our plasma cannons." Jake felt his ship shake slightly as the alien weapons struck, but the adaptive armor held perfectly. The AI system was already analyzing the plasma frequency and adjusting the hull's molecular structure to provide maximum protection. "Our turn," Jake said calmly. "Amy, target their lead cruiser. Let's show them what human engineering can do." The Defiance's quantum cannons fired, sending bursts of pure energy toward the nearest enemy ship. The aliens' shields, designed to stop conventional weapons, were useless against the new technology. The quantum energy passed right through their defenses and struck the cruiser's hull. The Zephyrian ship shuddered as the quantum blast tore through its armor plating. Explosions erupted across its surface as critical systems failed. Within seconds, the mighty cruiser was drifting helplessly in space, its weapons offline and its engines dead. "What kind of weapons are those?" Kralnex demanded from his remaining officers. "Unknown technology, sir. Our shields had no effect against them." Jake maneuvered his ship with incredible speed, using the Defiance's advanced engines to stay ahead of the alien weapons. Every time the Zephyrians fired, the human ship seemed to know where the shots were going, and moved out of the way. "Fire, again," Jake ordered. "Target their weapon systems." The second quantum blast struck another Zephyrian cruiser, disabling its main plasma cannons. The aliens were beginning to panic, unable to understand how one small ship was defeating their superior force. Maria Santos reported from engineering. "Captain, the AI system is learning their attack patterns. It can predict where they'll shoot next with 90% accuracy." Amy smiled as she targeted the third enemy ship. "They're so predictable. Same tactics, same formations, same mistakes." The battle continued for 20 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Defiance moved through the enemy formation like a dancer, avoiding their clumsy attacks while striking with surgical precision. One by one, The Zephyrian cruisers were disabled or destroyed. Only Kralnex's ship remained, and it was heavily damaged. His weapons were offline, his shields were failing, and his crew was in full panic. "This is impossible," he said again, staring at the human ship on his screen. "We are the masters of the galaxy. How can one primitive vessel defeat us?" Jake's voice came through the communication system, calm and steady. "Because you never learned to adapt. You relied on brute force for so long that you forgot how to actually fight." Kralnex realized his ship was doomed. With his last working engine, he turned toward the edge of the system and fled as fast as he could. Behind him, the wreckage of 4 Zephyrian cruisers drifted in space, proof that the unstoppable Dominion could be stopped. As his ship jumped to hyperspace, Kralnex knew he had to warn the main fleet. The humans were not the primitive species they appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous, an enemy that could learn and adapt. Admiral Vexthul paced across the bridge of his massive flagship, his 4 red eyes burning with rage. The report from Subcommander Kralnex seemed impossible. One small human ship destroying 4 Zephyrian cruisers. It had to be a lie or some kind of trick. "You expect me to believe that primitives defeated our advanced fleet?" Vexthul snarled at the young officer. "Perhaps you ran away like a coward instead of fighting properly." Kralnex stood at attention, his body shaking with fear and shame. "Admiral, I swear on my family's honor the humans have weapons we have never seen before. Their ship could not be damaged by our plasma cannons, and their energy beams passed right through our shields." Vexthul struck the young commander across the face with his clawed hand. "Impossible. Our technology has conquered 1,000 worlds. No species in the galaxy can match our firepower." But deep inside, the Admiral felt a cold fear growing. For 3 centuries, the Zephyrian Dominion had swept across the galaxy unopposed. Every enemy had fallen quickly to their superior weapons and overwhelming force. The idea that someone could resist them was unthinkable. "Gather the main battle fleet," Vexthul ordered his officers. "I will personally destroy these humans and show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us." Meanwhile, in the Proxima Centauri system, Captain Jake Morrison was preparing for the enemy's response. He knew his victory at Kepler would not go unanswered. The Zephyrians would come with everything they had. "Captain, we have another ship approaching," reported Lieutenant Paul Stevens. "It's one of ours." On the main screen, a second human warship appeared. The USS Vengeance was identical to the Defiance, built with the same advanced technology and experimental weapon systems. "This is Captain Rachel Foster," came a voice over the communication system. "Sorry I'm late to the party, Jake. How did your first contact go?" Jake smiled. Rachel was one of his oldest friends from the academy, and an excellent tactical commander. "Better than expected, Rachel. The Zephyrians are just as predictable as our intelligence report suggested." The 2 ships took position near a large asteroid field, using the rocks for cover. Jake knew the aliens would come looking for revenge, and he wanted to choose the battlefield. "Captain Morrison," called Chief Engineer Maria Santos from the Defiance's engine room. "Our AI system has finished analyzing the enemy weapon patterns from the last battle. It can now predict their attack strategies with 95% accuracy." Amy Rodriguez studied the tactical displays at her station. "Jake, if the intelligence reports are correct, they'll bring at least 20 ships to make sure they don't lose again." 20 ships against 2, Jake mused. "Those are better odds than I expected." Colonel Dan Cooper entered the bridge, wearing the black armor of Earth's Marine Forces. Dan commanded a special unit trained for boarding actions against alien vessels. His men were equipped with advanced weapons and armor designed specifically for fighting Zephyrians. "My Marines are ready, Captain," Dan reported. "If we get a chance to capture one of their ships, we can learn even more about their technology." Jake nodded. "Stay ready, Dan. Something tells me we're going to get that chance very soon." 3 hours later, the enemy arrived. Admiral Vexthul's battle group emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. His flagship was enormous, twice the size of a normal dreadnought and bristling with weapons. Around it flew 24 cruisers and destroyers, more firepower than had ever been assembled in one place. "There," Vexthul pointed at his tactical display. 2 small ships hiding in those asteroids. Destroy them both and end this nonsense. But Jake had spent years studying Zephyrian tactics. He knew they would spread out in a standard attack formation, trying to surround their targets. It was the same pattern they had used for centuries, and it was about to become their downfall. "Rachel, execute Plan Thunderbolt," Jake ordered. The 2 human ships burst from the asteroid field at incredible speed. Instead of running away, they charged straight at the center of the enemy formation. The Zephyrians, expecting their targets to flee, were caught completely off guard. Lieutenant Commander Steve Johnson launched his fighter squadron from the Defiance's hidden launch bays. The small human fighters were invisible to enemy sensors and moved like deadly insects through the alien formation. "All fighters target their communication arrays," Steve ordered. "Let's blind them before they know what hit them." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Plasma beams and particle cannons filled space with deadly energy. But the human ships danced between the attacks, their AI systems predicting every shot before it was fired. Jake's quantum cannon struck the first enemy cruiser, punching through its shields like they were made of paper. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant fireball, its crew never understanding what had killed them. Rachel's ship disabled. 2 destroyers with surgical precision, targeting their engines and weapons systems. The Zephyrian vessels drifted helplessly as their power systems failed. "Impossible," Vexthal whispered, watching his mighty fleet being torn apart by 2 small ships. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer was frantically checking sensor readings. "Admiral, their ships seem to be learning from our attacks. Each time we fire, they become harder to hit." The human fighters completed their mission, destroying the communication systems on half the enemy ships. The Zephyrian formation fell into chaos as commanders could no longer coordinate their attacks. Colonel Dan Cooper saw his opportunity. "Captain, the enemy flagship's shields are down. Request permission to board." "Permission granted, Dan. Take that ship." Cooper's Marines launched in heavily armored assault pods, racing toward the massive alien flagship. The Zephyrians tried to stop them, but their point defense systems had been destroyed by the fighter attack. The Marines breached the enemy hull and fought their way through the ship's corridors. The Zephyrians were fierce fighters, but they had never faced opponents with such advanced equipment and training. Within an hour, Cooper's voice crackled over the communication system. "Captain Morrison, the flagship is secure. Admiral Vexthal is our prisoner." Jake looked at the tactical display, seeing the wreckage of the once mighty Zephyrian fleet floating in space. Of the 25 ships that had arrived, only 7 remained functional, and they were fleeing the system as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. "Amy, send the broadcast," Jake ordered. Amy activated the special communication device Dr. Walsh had given them. The message from Earth's leaders went out on all frequencies, reaching every enslaved world in the galaxy. "People of the galaxy, this is the Terran Defense Force. The Zephyrian Dominion is not invincible. We have proven that they can be defeated. Rise up, fight back, and reclaim your freedom. Earth stands with you." Across the galaxy, the message was received by billions of enslaved beings. For the first time in 3 centuries, they had hope. The message from Earth spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 enslaved worlds, beings who had lived in fear for centuries suddenly felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. Dr. Lisa Chen stood in the command center of the Aichi resistance base on New Altair, watching as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. She had escaped the destruction of her homeworld and now helped coordinate the growing rebellion. "Lisa, you need to see this," called Commander Pete Walker, a human officer who had arrived with the latest supply ship. "Uprisings are starting everywhere. The Cygnus sector, the Vega colonies, even worlds in the Dominion's core territories." Lisa smiled as she read the reports. On planet after planet, enslaved populations were attacking their Zephyrian overseers. They had primitive weapons compared to the aliens, but they had numbers and desperation on their side. "The humans are keeping their promise," she said. "Look at these coordination reports. Human ships are appearing in dozens of systems, providing weapons and tactical support. General Laura Kim commanded the human liberation fleets from her flagship, the USS Freedom. Laura was a brilliant strategist who had spent 20 years planning for this moment. She knew that winning a few battles was not enough. They needed to break the Dominion's power completely. "Captain Mitchell, what's the status of the Centauri operation?" Laura asked. Captain Ben Mitchell checked his reports. "The Third Liberation Fleet has secured the mining colonies. We're distributing quantum weapons to the local resistance fighters. The Zephyrians are pulling back from 3 more systems." Laura nodded with satisfaction. The plan was working perfectly. Instead of fighting the entire Dominion fleet in one massive battle, they were hitting dozens of targets simultaneously. The aliens couldn't be everywhere at once. "General, we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Morrison," reported her communications officer. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, speaking from the bridge of the Defiance. Behind him, the captured Admiral Vex Thul sat in chains, his 4 red eyes filled with hatred. "General Kim, our prisoner has been very helpful," Jake said. "He's given us the location of the Dominion's main fleet and their homeworld coordinates." Laura leaned forward with interest. "Where are they?" "The Zephyrian homeworld is in the Omega Nebula, heavily defended by their remaining forces. Intelligence suggests they're planning a final stand there." Admiral Vex Thul spoke for the first time since his capture, his voice filled with venom. "You think you have won, but you understand nothing. The Dominion has reserves you cannot imagine. When our full power is unleashed, your pathetic rebellion will be crushed." Jake looked at the alien commander with pity rather than anger. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about our ships or our weapons. It's about something you never understood: the power of hope." On the Zephyrian homeworld, panic was spreading through the ruling council. Supreme Commander Vex Thul's superior, stood before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones that had represented conquered territories were turning blue as world after world declared independence. "How many ships do we have left?" Vex Thul demanded from his fleet commander. "Perhaps 300, Supreme Commander. But they are scattered across our remaining territories, trying to put down local rebellions." Vex Thul's claws scraped against the metal floor. "Recall them all. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. We make our stand here at the homeworld. If we can destroy the human fleet, the rebellion will collapse." But the Supreme Commander was wrong. The rebellion had grown beyond depending on any single fleet or leader. On 1,000 worlds, ordinary beings were fighting for their freedom, with whatever weapons they could find. Jake Morrison led the final assault on the Zephyrian homeworld. The human fleet had grown to 50 ships, each one equipped with the latest quantum weapons and adaptive armor. Alongside them flew vessels from dozens of liberated worlds, their crews eager for revenge against their former oppressors. "This is it," Jake said to his crew as they approached the heavily defended system. 3 centuries of tyranny end today. The Zephyrian defense fleet was enormous, nearly 300 warships arranged in perfect formation around their homeworld. But Jake had learned something important during the war. Numbers meant nothing without adaptability. "All ships, execute the Prometheus maneuver," Jake ordered. The human fleet split into small groups, each one targeting a different section of the enemy formation. Instead of meeting the aliens head-on, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Captain Rachel Foster's ship destroyed an entire enemy squadron by luring them into an asteroid field, then using the rocks as weapons. Colonel Dan Cooper's Marines captured a Zephyrian command ship, turning its weapons against the rest of the fleet. But the real battle was not happening in space. On the planet below, enslaved workers who had built the Dominion's war machines were rising up. Led by local resistance fighters armed with human weapons, they stormed the government buildings and military bases. Amy Rodriguez watched the planetary assault from her tactical station. "Jake, the surface rebellion is succeeding. The planet's defense grid is going offline." "Perfect," Jake smiled. "Time to end this war." The USS Defiance led the final assault on the Zephyrian command center. Their quantum cannons cut through the building's defenses like a knife through paper. Within minutes, the structure that had controlled half the galaxy was nothing but smoking ruins. Supreme Commander Zekthol died in the collapse, his dreams of galactic conquest buried with him. The surviving Zephyrian ships surrendered or fled to the dark spaces between the stars. Jake stood on his bridge, looking at the liberated homeworld on his screen. Across the galaxy, the last Dominion forces were laying down their weapons. The UI war was over. "Captain," Paul Stevens called from the communications station. "We're receiving surrender messages from 14 star systems. The Dominion is finished." Dr. Lisa Chen's voice came through the communication system from New Altair. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of all the liberated worlds, thank you. You gave us back our freedom." Jake thought about all the people who had made this moment possible. The refugees who had warned Earth decades ago. The scientists and engineers who had developed new weapons. The soldiers who had fought and died in dozens of battles. "We all did this together," Jake replied. "Now comes the hard part, building a better galaxy." Amy looked at him with curiosity. "What do you mean?" "The Dominion ruled through fear and force," Jake explained. "We need to prove that cooperation and freedom work better than tyranny. That's the real test." Years later, historians would mark this day as the beginning of the Galactic Alliance, a union of free worlds working together for mutual protection and prosperity. The Defiance became a symbol of hope, patrolling the galaxy to ensure that no new tyrants could rise to threaten the peace. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the surviving Zephyrians learned a valuable lesson, that no empire, no matter how powerful, can stand forever against the combined will of free beings.